Welcome back, or if you're new here, thank you very much for checking out my channel. My name is Marcus Auerbach. I'm a real estate agent here in Milwaukee, in Mequon to be precise. And here we have the real estate market update for August 2020 and the September forecast. So what's going on with real estate, with everything negative going on in the world? We had just reported the worst second quarter GDP in the US since the Great Recession. We have COVID numbers on the rise. We have unemployment numbers that are very, very high. So there's a lot of bad news from the economy that really should affect the housing market in a negative way. And when you look on social media, you seem to find a lot of evidence that the housing market is really crashing. So I have a lot of conversations with sellers that think the market is really, really bad. And in fact, the opposite is true. And you may have seen, some of the positive news in the last weeks when you follow some outlets that are more fact and data driven. You may have come across some of these. One that stood out to me was Zillow. They really made me chuckle. The real estate market stared the pandemic right in the eye and it hasn't blinked. I thought that was funny. Housing Wire says shockingly strong. Myers Research says has been nothing short of remarkable. Realtor.com said an astonishing rebound. The Washington Post had a really good question here. They said, with the economy sputtering, why is real estate soaring? And that's a really good question indeed that I would like to answer a little bit more in detail in the second half of this video. Because you might suspect that this all has to do with COVID. And in fact, we have to take a look at a little bigger picture, and it is influenced by COVID at the moment, but the circumstances we have in the market are driven by factors outside of the pandemic. So actually very interesting stuff. We'll take a look at that later. First, let me just cover a little bit about the housing market here. And we can see here, we still have an inventory shortage. So these are just July numbers straight out of MLS. We have homes listed in July, 3,446, 10% less new listings than we had in July last year. So we have still less inventory coming on the market. This number is better than it used to be a month ago, 2 months ago. So more stuff is coming on the market. But, and here's the but, we have 20% less homes for sale. So how is this possible that we see more homes coming on the market, but we still have less homes for sale? The answer is easy. We're selling faster than what homes are coming on the market, plus 7.1% actually, 3,280 homes sold. So that's the reason why these things are happening. And I give an example from this week. We have put 2 listings live, single family homes. This week we've been working in the last weeks with the sellers, getting the homes ready, getting all the marketing going. And I'm beyond excited with how both listings are taking off. We booked in the first, 48 hours, we booked 62 showing appointments. So it's going to be a busy weekend, no doubt. And I'm very excited for my sellers. They're going to look at some really nice offers here, no doubt about it. But it really shows how active the market is, and it drives up the prices. So you can see it also here. These are median sold prices. So this is a number to follow because this is not what sellers want. This is actually sold. So after the fact, after the closing, when the numbers get reported, this is what's happening. So Milwaukee Metro Area in July year to date, we are looking at 235,000, 9.3% more than last year for a single family home. That's the median. So median is when you have 100 homes sold, you look at number 50 in the middle. That's the median price. It works better in real estate than the average. So we're up 9.3%. Milwaukee up as well. Keep in mind we have some lower income neighborhoods here included, so that brings the median down, but still 188,000 median for Milwaukee County. That's almost plus 7.5% over what we had a year ago. Ozaukee County as well. Take this with a grain of salt here because this number looks a little lower than it actually feels. That has to do with the fact that in Ozaukee County we have a lot of ultra luxury homes, 750, a million up. So when these fluctuate a little bit, it changes this number. but Ozaukee market is definitely up as well, especially Cedarburg, Grafton, Port Washington. You can't keep a house on the market. Mequon as well, very, very hot market. What's going on with buyer traffic? So if you've seen my previous videos, you probably know this chart. Showing time lets us record very, very precisely how many people are seeing houses every day, and we can chart this out. This is how it looks like. The blue chart for reference is last year, and then the orange chart here is this year. So you can see pandemic hit, we went into lockdown for about 2 weeks, and then buyers became active again, and they said, now we really want to buy a house, let's go look at some. And we crossed last year's indicator here, and ever since early May, we have been about 15% higher in buyer activity than we had been last year. And last year was crazy. So very, very strong on the buyer side. If anybody who has been thinking about selling a home and thinks the market is bad, you have to look at this data. There's so many buyers out there. They're looking for properties. Just in case you're wondering, this is the 4th of July, so this happens every year. We got that dip here. All right, breaking it down by week. This is as close I can look at the market is in weekly increments. And you can see here new listings per week. We're stable here at a little over 700 single family homes listing per week, hitting the market per week. So this is less than I would like to see and less than we had last year, but at least it's stable and it's somewhat of a decent supply. Certainly much better than when we were in the low 400s. I got really worried back then in April. So what does that mean for inventory? We have here accepted offers per week, also stabilizing out at about 700. So pretty much what's coming on the market is getting sold. And you can slice it differently when you look here at the same accepted offers per week in percent. You can see last week we sold new record 12.1% of all the listings that were on the market in 1 week. So if we do this for 4 weeks, that's almost 50%. So in 4 weeks, we sell 50% of all the listings that are out there. The ones that are not selling are usually either way overpriced or just in rough condition, sometimes even both. So usually, just for reference, we're here in the 6-7% range over the last couple of years. So this is an extremely high number. It speaks to the activity level that we have on the buyer side. So when we look at this over a map, and this is data from the NRA, so different source, but we have here a seller traffic index that is measuring how active sellers are putting their houses on the market. And that goes from very weak to very strong. Dark blue is very strong. So you can see as a nation, sellers are really holding back, and nobody's holding back more than Wisconsin. We are dark gray here, very weak on the seller traffic. So this has to do with the bad news that we see in the evening news every day about the economy, about the unemployment, about COVID. Sellers are generally very concerned that the real estate market is bad and they cannot sell their house. So this is, the narrative is the same in the entire country. It varies state by state a little bit. But this is the seller traffic index. Now let's take a look at what's going on with the buyers. And same data here, we got very weak to very strong dark blue. So you can see, with the exception of Florida, buyers are very, very active. And of course, Wisconsin here, polar opposite, is in one of the few states that is in the very strong category. So the story is not unique to Wisconsin. It's basically everywhere in the US, but Wisconsin really assumes a special role because we are one of the weakest on the seller side and one of the strongest on the buyer side in relation to the rest of the country. All right, so as I've promised earlier in the video, in part 2, I'd like to talk a little bit about the real estate market in general and why do we have the situation that we have. As you know, if you're trying to take an educated guess for the future, you first need to try to understand what's currently happening in a market and why the things are happening the way they're happening now. So I get the question a lot online as well, why is the real estate market so hot? And a lot of people are concerned, is it a bubble? Is it like the stock market? Is it going to crash? So the first and very, very important distinction between the stock market and the real estate market is the stock market is largely driven by earnings and earnings per share. And it's also driven by outlook on the economy, and it's driven by what potential investors are thinking is going to happen to the economy. So you have a very, very different dynamic in the stock market than you have in the real estate market. Real estate is, first of all, a hard asset. And so that's a hard asset is different to a paper asset like a stock. And secondly, the real estate market is fundamentally driven not by earnings or anything like that. It's driven by supply and demand. So it's a quite efficient market, but not an incredibly efficient market. This is why you always see a little fuzziness on pricing. But fundamentally, it's driven by supply and demand. And you have large supply and demand trends that span over decades. And you have short-term supply and demand trends. For example, the demand every year is lower between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And then it ramps up in spring very early. So supply and demand is what's driving the real estate market. Okay, we have established that. Now the next question is, where is the demand coming from? So we're going to take a look. Why do we all of a sudden have that demand on housing? Are there a bunch of people immigrating from Austria to Milwaukee and buying up all the real estate? I'm from Austria, by the way, if you didn't know. So what's happening there? And why is there not more inventory? Where is inventory in general coming from? So we're talking about that as well. And understanding these major trends will allow us to take a little bit of a guess in, are these trends going to continue, or may we see a trend next year or in 2 years or in 3 years? So before we step into that, let me just quickly refresh you a little bit on supply and demand theory. I'm sure you have seen this curve in school. So just a quick reminder, when you have a demand curve and you have a supply curve, and where the demand curve and the supply curve are meeting is where you have an equilibrium for price. So this is called here E1. So a certain quantity of product, Q1, is being sold at a certain price, which is labeled here P1. So that's our market price that the market is establishing between current supply and current demand. So now if you are shifting the demand curve because it happens to be spring and more people feel like buying a house, so the demand curve is shifting, what happens, there is no change in supply, so automatically you are going up in volume because more demand equals more sales, but it also equals a new price point. So between demand and supply, we're establishing a new equilibrium, which is E2, and that is now the new market price. And as you can see, prices have gone up from P1 to P2. Now, the issue that we have on hand is we're not only moving the demand curve, we are currently also moving the supply curve. So the supply curve is moving in this direction, meaning we have less supply. So the market is establishing again an equilibrium, which is with a quantity here Q3 and a price P3. And this is what we're currently seeing in the Milwaukee real estate market. So we have an increased demand and we have reduced supply. So we're seeing a reduced quantity at higher prices. And if you go back to the beginning of the video, if you look at the overall sales numbers, we were down, I think it was 9.7% in overall sales. And the main reason is because of this here, we have an inequality. We had a shift in the demand curve and a shift in the supply curve, leading us to higher prices and lower quantities at the same time. Okay, so that's just a great theory. Thanks for bearing with me here. Let's take a look at supply. So where is supply usually coming from? If we talk about houses, we can talk about new construction. So here you have the new construction starts, the permit issued by county. This is from the Wisconsin Builders Association in 2019 and 2018. And you can see here in 2019, we had a total of 8,719 new construction permits issued. So these houses were built last year, maybe some of them this year. Sounds like a lot of houses. A lot of them were built in Waukesha, so Menominee Falls. Sussex, Lennon, Brookfield. There's a lot of new construction going on, several new subdivisions. We have quite a bit in Washington County and also in Ozaukee County here where I am. Not very much in Milwaukee. And the reason why we don't see a whole lot of new construction in Milwaukee is because Milwaukee as a county is basically fully built out. So there are no large areas of land that could be developed. It's all urbanized. You have, streets with houses. There are no big cornfields that could be converted into subdivisions. So this is why anything that we have currently in terms of inventory in Milwaukee is finite supply. So, Milwaukee with a median sold price now at $188,000, those $188,000, they're not making them anymore. We have only as many as we have. So we're limited on supply here in Milwaukee, and we're growing on the outskirts by about 9,000. So that sounds great, 9,000 new homes. Here's problem number one. The Wisconsin housing market has about 2.6 million housing units. So that's between rented and owner-occupied. It's all lumped together. But so that comes out to about 1/3%. So this doesn't move the needle very much. We don't have very much new construction in relation to the current inventory. So new construction is not a significant source at the moment for Wisconsin for additional inventory. The other issue that we have with new construction is it's expensive. So here we have the numbers from MLS 2019, new construction for sale, only 276 units. So those are units that were offered by builders for sale on the MLS. So that does not include all the houses that have been built, where a client or a buyer went to a builder and said, okay, I'll take one of your lot and house packages and you'll build it for me. Those are what we call spec homes. So a builder is building a home and then they offer it for sale. Usually when it's in the drywall stage or a little bit further, it hits the market and then it's offered for sale. So now those 276 units, a very tiny number compared to 2.6 million homes we have in Wisconsin. We have a breakdown by price here, and you can see that the majority are priced between $400,000 and $500,000. In fact, the median here is about $485,000, and that usually is only rough grade. So you still need a driveway, you still need topsoil for the grass, then you still need to plant grass, you still need all the landscaping, you need a walkway to the front door, and you probably need a deck in the rear or a patio in the rear. So you can add probably another $30,000 to $50,000 on top of this price here. So new construction is relatively expensive if you compare it to the median in Milwaukee at $188,000. The median here, all in, loaded and finished, move-in ready is probably a little over $500,000. So that's more than twice of what you're paying in median for an existing home. So small numbers and not very affordable. This is why new construction is currently not a good source of supply for the Milwaukee real estate market. We might see more condos in the future. They can be built more cost effective and on a larger scale. So that might bring some inventory, but it will take quite some time to plan high rises and build them. And so we're talking several years, and even then it's not going to be a major source of supply. All right, so let's take a look at demographics, because demographics are the key answer here to both the supply and the demand question. So you're familiar with all the generations. And so we have here with the millennials, we have the currently largest buying segment. So we have almost 83 million millennials. That's the largest population segment in the US. And they have decided in the last, I would say, couple years that they should no longer be renting and they should actually be buying a house. Millennials did everything later in their life than the previous generation. They went to school on average longer, they got married later, and they bought their house. They have children later, and they're buying their first house later. But finally, millennials have aged to the point where they have become the largest segment of home buyers. They are no longer a generation of renters anymore. So they have aged to this segment. Now this is creating the demand. This is where the demand is coming from, because 20 years ago, these guys are 21 to 38 right now in 2020. 20 years ago, they went to kindergarten and high school. So they did not cause demand on the housing market. But now we have 83 million of them looking to buy a house. And by the way, the Generation Z is right behind them. So once this demand is satisfied, then these guys will come in. Okay, so this the right side of the US population, about 340 million in total, the right side of the population that is constituting for a majority of the demand, in particular in the lower price points, up to 200, up to 300, maybe up to $400,000. Now, the Generation X, so these are now 39 to 54-year-olds, so I'm smack square in the middle there. We are not moving that much anymore. So we are staying 2 times longer than we used to be. It used to be that Generation X was a very move-happy generation, moved for a new job. No longer we like staying where we're at. And we stay at a house on average twice as long as we used to. Now then we're going up to the baby boomers, and that's the generation that's now 55 to 73. So those are the parents of the millennials. And the baby boomers are aging in place. They are not selling. A lot of them are remodeling their homes and making them age friendly, make some modifications to bathrooms and whatnot to stay in place. They like staying in their homes by and large. But the other problem is that people in general get older and older. So this, comes in between the top end of the boomers, and then we have the silent generation here. So the share of the silent generation, which is now 74 to 91, a lot of them have already passed away, and their houses became available, and they have been bought by the Generation X. The problem is now the life expectation is going up, so people are living, fortunately, longer and longer. And when you have a market segment that's probably, we have 68 million here and we got 23 million here, so combined that's almost 100 million. If they are living 10 years longer, and so these houses are not becoming vacant for another 10 years, that is a serious constraint on the supply side, because these houses are not coming on the market. And many of these people are living in Milwaukee in neighborhoods that would be perfectly affordable for first-time home buyers, being under $200,000 or under $300,000. So this is where the shift, the big, major demographic shift is coming from on the supply side and on the demand side. The answer is in the aging of the different population groups in the US. All right, so what's motivating the millennials? One word: rent. We only have here numbers to the last census 2017, but I think you can easily imagine, and what happened to rent in the last 3 years. So rent keeps going up, and so millennials decide that buying a home is actually a really good idea for them to actually, generate some equity and work on their net worth. At the same time, mortgage rates, you remember from last month, we were down at 3%, now we're down at 2.88. I'm refinancing my personal home at 2.75%. So rates are fantastic right now. And between high rents and low interest rates, it makes for a very conducive case to actually go and stop renting and buy a home. So that is not a major trend, but it certainly supports the decision of the millennials to actually go and buy their first house. The same is true with COVID. So COVID adds like an accelerator in this mix. So because some sellers are worried that they can't sell their house because the market might be bad, so they're holding off, they're delaying the decision, they're not putting the house on the market, so they're causing further constraint to the supply side. But COVID is not the reason why we have the situation that we have now. COVID is simply, amplifying the situation that we have right now, more on a short-term basis. So this is just something that, is affecting us, since spring and now in summer, and it's gonna be with us for a while. But people are getting more and more adapted, and we're accepting it as, a normal situation that we just deal with and work with. So another element that's playing into this is inflation. And when you follow the news, when you see what the Fed is talking about, when you follow people, for example, Ray Dalio is a very interesting guy. He built the world's largest hedge fund. He's retired now, and he's just, having fun predicting the economy and predicting what's going on. Ray Dalio came out last week and said, yep, we're going to see inflation. For many of you who have been thinking about monetary policy, this is obviously not a surprise. When you print $6 trillion in additional money and pump it into the system, the value of the dollar is generally going down. So inflation is not good for savers because it will reduce the amount of value that you contain in your savings because the value per dollar is going down. So inflation tends to punish savers, and inflation tends to benefit people who have debt, because any money that you owe that is on a long-term fixed interest, the debt owed will also shrink in value. So that is going to become, in my opinion, also an interesting factor if the Fed is actually trying to get inflation from 1.5–2% to maybe 2.5–3%. Then inflation will become another consideration and another driver in the marketplace. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on as we're going into fall here. Let's see what the Fed is deciding. Speaking of fall, so September 2020 outlook, I'm trying an outlook. It's easier now to give a prediction than it used to be 3 months ago, because we are seeing, and you've seen it throughout this video, in many ways we are finding, we're stabilizing, we're finding equilibrium points. And so the September will be stronger than usual, I think. We're usually seeing, August being a little bit slower, summer slump, and then in September, we're seeing a second wave, second hump in the market. That's basically the second biggest one after the spring market. The fall market, September, early October, is usually very, very busy. And we're going to see a strong September market, absolutely no doubt about it. Inventory is stabilizing, even though this is happening on a low level. I think we have a number of things that are going on in our favor. We have low interest rates, we have higher confidence. With higher confidence, we also have more sellers that are trusting the market and bringing the house on the market. But also on the buyer side, low rates and higher confidence equals higher demand. So we'll see these supply and demand curves keep shifting. And so that means, tough competition for buyers, and, it's going to be the new normal that on interesting properties for a good price, there is going to be multiple offers, and the seller is just going to pick the strongest of these offers. So sales volume is going to be up, but the total sales volume is a really poor indicator for the health of the market, because people say, oh, sales volume is down, so the market must be bad. No, sales volume is down because we don't have enough product to sell. So if you bring more product to the market, it will sell. And I think when you look through the breakdown here, that hopefully makes sense. So that's my outlook for September. Thank you very much for your time and watching this all the way to the end. If you found value in this, I have 2 suggestions for you. Number 1 is maybe go back and watch previous monthly market updates, because I always highlight a special topic, and you might find some golden nuggets there for you that are interesting. So go back to the July and the June video. And if you find value in those, I would be super excited if you would subscribe to my channel, and I could welcome here in about a month from now. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day.